from our scripture readings, my sermon is a very controversial one that isn't conventional. It's a bit different from what you usually hear. So we're going to learn a lot from today about what has happened in our past and what is even happening today. So the sermon is entitled Boom Bang Lockdown. And we've all experienced it, haven't we? We're experiencing it right now, aren't we? Yeah. And this pandemic came upon us so suddenly, and it's like everything, life was just normal for us, and then boom, what in a second. But while we were sitting at home enjoying our free vacation, things were happening. A lot of things were happening around the world, and we might not be cognizant of. So, if you can't gauge from all these events and from our Bible verse that we are living in the end time, I'm going to prove it to you. So I'm sure in 2020 we saw this meme about people experiencing January, February, and then going into lockdown and then December. Like the whole year was a past. We couldn't remember. So while we were sitting at home, we know these events were happening, and it was happening so quickly. So I'm going to guide you from the beginning of 2020 up to this very moment in time, about all the events that happened, to show you that crazy major events were happening around the world while we were just enjoying ourselves. And I'm also going to show you how they fit into our timeline. When we went into lockdown on level 5, level 4, level 3, there were events happening in between, sometimes days apart or even on the same day. And these aren't small events, this is major stuff. Are you ready? Yeah. So, keeping in mind our scripture, let's see an in-depth overview of 2020 and 2021. On January 2nd, the Australian wildfires. Now, these fires actually started in 2019 and they peaked on January 2nd. Now, wildfires are notorious in locations that have very dry climates, and Australia has an extremely dry climate. And it's revealed what devastation it caused. 186,000 square kilometers was burnt down. That's the size of a country, South Korea. To put that into perspective, that's 27 million soccer fields gone. 3,000 homes were destroyed. People's lives, their memories, all that they built up their entire life was gone in a matter of days. And it says that the air quality index was 23 times higher than the hazardous status. Now, the air quality index is a sort of indicator that tells you how pure the air is, depending on the chemicals or the pollutants in the air. This was 23 times worse than what it is when it's toxic for a human. You can imagine how bad it was. 34 people were killed and fortunately not more. And it cost about 103 billion Australian dollars. And to put that in our money, that's 1.2 trillion rands. That's more than the GDP of our country. If our country had to sustain a loss like this, we won't survive. Yeah. And 3 billion terrestrial species were driven to extinction. Extinction means gone. The only way you're going to get it back is if God recreates a species. Al Jazeera said that it's one of the worst wildfires in modern history. What date is it? On the same day, the Iranian general is assassinated. They said it was a US drone strike attack, and it was apparently done to protect the US from future Iranian wars. You can see his image there. This man was there to protect his country and his family, but it was just done out of cold blood for the purpose of war. And the CNN said that Trump was leading the world into World War III because of this. Didn't Jesus say in this verse that nation will go against nation? 5 days later, on January 5th, everybody's favorite friend arrived, the coronavirus. At this stage in time, it wasn't known much of. It was a small thing. It hasn't reached our ears in South Africa yet. So the WHO branch, which is the World Health Organization branch in China, they notified the headquarters that there's this virus that is spreading so rapidly, and they don't know what to do with it. And this is what the coronavirus actually looks like under a fluorescent electron microscope. And there's much conspiracy regarding how this virus actually came to be. Now I want to clear that up today. This video I found was pretty informative, it's very short, and I want you to listen very closely as to how it spread from animals to us, and to pick out what law humans were breaking. One law in the Bible. Let's see if we're able to get this.
A lot of the viruses that make us sick actually originate in animals. Some of the viruses that cause the flu come from birds and pigs. HIV AIDS comes from chimpanzees. The deadly Ebola virus likely originates in bats. And in the case of the 2019 coronavirus, there's some evidence it went from a bat to a pangolin before infecting a human. While viruses are very good at jumping between species, it's rare for a deadly one to make this journey all the way to humans. That's because it would need all these hosts to encounter each other at some point. That's where the Wuhan market comes in. It's a wet market. A kind of place where live animals are slaughtered and sold for consumption.
It was not surprise at all, and I think that it was not surprise to many scientists.
Peter Lee is professor and expert on China's animal trade.
The cages stacked one over another. Animals at the bottom are often soaked with all kinds of liquid animal excrement, pus, blood, or whatever the liquid they're receiving from the animals.
That's exactly how a virus can jump from one animal to another. If that animal then comes in contact with or is consumed by a human, the virus could potentially infect them. And if the virus then spreads to other humans, it causes an outbreak. Wet markets are scattered all over the world, but the ones in China are particularly well known because they offer a wide variety of animals, including wildlife.
He said the plurals of the animals were passing to another when the cages were scattering each other. What law were we breaking? Leviticus 11? Unclean meats? If humans just stayed away from unclean meats, we wouldn't be in this pandemic at all. Can you please just put the light up for me so we can see the video? Now in 2011, there was a movie that was released in theaters called Contagion. And this showed exactly, they predicted what is happening right now. This is the last scene of the movie, and I want you to watch how dirty we are as humans. I had the first one to say you. The guy didn't even wash his hands. Then he went back to the US with the virus and he went everywhere. He first went to the airport, that was the first spot, and it spread everywhere. If we just obeyed how spread it happened. The next day, this is January 8th, there's a Ukrainian flight that crashes, guess where? Iran. Didn't we just hear about Iran a few days ago? This is the Ukrainian international flight 752, where 176 people were killed. They got onto the flight thinking they'll come out on the other side, but they didn't. Our life is too short, we shouldn't be playing games, and this event proves it. Flight attendants, pilots, passengers, all gone. Iran mistakenly shot down the plane with a missile. How can someone mistakenly shoot down a plane with an armed missile? This is automated. It is definitely intentional. Didn't Jesus say in his verse that there would be wars and rumors of wars? We can see all of these countries coming together to play in this sort of chess game. Just 3 days later, on January 11th, China reports its first ever coronavirus death. Now this person actually died on January 9th, but it's confirmed to be coronavirus on January 11th, and this is his body being rolled out by the doctors. 5 days later, on January 16th, Donald Trump is impeached. Now, an impeachment is, in our context, a vote of no confidence, like what we did to Jacob Zuma. And Trump expressed a lot of hate for other people, like abuse of power, xenophobia, religious discrimination. He hated the Islamic people. And you remember the incident about the Mexican wall where he told the US people that they would build a wall between Mexico and China to make the Mexicans pay for it? What kind of command in power does that? Especially the President of the United States, who has extremely high expectations. And since he stepped into power, the country is in political unrest. The trial ended on February 5th, and they called for a re-election. It worked. We expect people in power like this to use their power for good, but instead he abused it. Exactly 1 week later after the impeachment, on January 23rd, Wuhan, China goes into lockdown. Now, this is the first province that goes, or province or city that goes into a lockdown, not a country. Now, you keep that at the back of your mind. This is 11 million residents for 76 days. And 3 days later, there's a crash. Professional NBA player Kobe Bryant, his daughter and her friends all perish in a crash. On the photo on the left, you can see the crash site. There are 2 trays. On the tray on the left, you can see their bodies piled up. And on the right, you can see what remains of the helicopter. Then on a picture on the right, we see Kobe and his daughter together. The young girls are her friends. There's the pilot on the left bottom. And the elderly people are their parents. James 4 verse 14 says, "Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time, then vanishes." 5 days later, on January 31st, the UK pulls out of the EU for good. This is known as the Brexit movement. For those who don't know, this is a movement for the UK to officially leave the European Union, which is sort of a conglomeration of the European countries. Now, don't we remember a prophecy in Daniel chapter 2 about the image and the feature of iron and clay? Where God said that Europe will try to unite itself, but it won't work. It just happened. They pulled out, and God's word is true even 4,000 years later. What month are we in? 1 month has passed. How many major events have happened? 10. 10 major events happened in the span of 1 month. February 11th, the World Health Organization names the coronavirus COVID-19. Now, COVID-19 is the name of the disease, not the virus. The virus is called SARS-CoV-2. That's the thing that counts in deaths. 10 days later, after the virus is named, there's a local swarm in East Africa. Al Arabiya says it's the worst infestation for a quarter of a century. It's 25 years since something like this has happened. City-sized swarms came and caused a famine in a matter of hours. These swarms were the size of Durban. Jesus said that there would be famine in the last days. 25 million people were without food. You don't hear about this stuff. This is rare to hear about. It's happening so quickly. 3 days later, on February 24th, Harvey Weinstein is convicted. Now, this man, he's a disgraced Hollywood producer, and he was convicted on 106 counts of first-degree sexual assault, 19 counts of third-degree rape, and he was sentenced to only 23 years in prison. I think this man should have been on death row for what he did. Don't you think so? People with wealth think they can abuse their power in this world, but they should be using it for good. Didn't Jesus say that the love of man will grow cold? Yes. 10 days later, on March 12th, COVID hits home. We get our first ever case, where a man and his family, they travel to Italy, and they return, and he was found to be positive, and he was quarantined in Grace Hospital in Johannesburg. His family was later confirmed to have the virus, but fortunately, they all recovered. Then, 5 days later, remember I told you about Wuhan was the first city to go into lockdown? This is the first country to go into lockdown. This is Italy. Now, the significance of them going into lockdown is that they were such a small country, and it spread so quickly. And according to last week, the stats are that 131,517 people have died in Italy alone due to coronavirus. Now, you might say that that is small, but according to the country's size, it's a very big stat. They were the center of the European pandemic. I'm not sure on the news during that time you'd have heard of them going to serious conditions of lockdown. Now, the reason why is because they have the 6th longest life expectancy at 84 years old. And you'll say that's a very good thing, and it is. But the problem is that about a quarter of the population are geriatrics, like elderly people, and COVID attacks the weak. So the elderly population was dying. And to put in perspective how small the country was, if you take KZN and you cut it into 6 pieces, you take 5 of those pieces, that's the entire country of Italy. Just our province alone is the size of that country. You can imagine how hard it was to social distance, let alone prevent the spread of the virus. And the next day, the WHO declares COVID-19 a pandemic. And this is when all hell breaks loose. Our world is at crisis level, and we are in panic. 5 days later, after the pandemic happens, the stock market crashes. And it hasn't crashed since 1987, according to Business Insider. That's 33 years. The investors were pulling off their money from the markets because they were afraid of the coronavirus, and the stock prices were plummeting. 8 days later, on March 24th, the Tokyo Summer Olympics was postponed to July this year, and fortunately this did happen. Now the reason was that the athletes couldn't leave their home country to go to Tokyo because of restrictions. And this was actually the second time that Tokyo was going to have the Olympics in their country. And then that fateful day arrived, 3 days later, on March 27th, when we entered alert level 5. Malls and shops were closed, our schools, universities, our workplaces were all shut down, travel was prohibited, and life as we knew it came to a halt. 5 days after that, on April 2nd, our global cases surpassed 1 million, went over that. And the virus has invaded every single country at this point, and almost every country is in some sort of lockdown. On April 9th, New York has more cases than any single country. A single state, which is like a province to us, has more cases than countries. It has a population of about 8.4 million people, spaced out across roughly the size of 3.5 times the size of Germany. You can imagine how hard it was to social distance. Less than 3 weeks later, we enter level 4 lockdown on May 1st. Are you seeing how these events fit in? Can you see how these events fit into our timeline? So much was going on while we were just sitting at home. 3 days later, on May 4th, murder hornets were spotted in Washington, USA. Now, multiple stings from these guys can kill you. And Jesus spoke of pestilences that happen in our day. Don't we see this happening now? And he said that his spirit is being pulled away from this earth very slowly. It's happening. 3 weeks later, one of the biggest movements in the history of mankind happened. Black Lives Matter. And this was George Floyd, who was killed by Minneapolis police. And how he died was the policeman placed his knee on a man's neck and he asphyxiated to death. And this sparked the BLM protests worldwide. Even our country was involved in this. And the policeman was charged with second and third degree murder and second degree manslaughter. Now, if only our world honored this man's death as they honored Jesus' death, Jesus would have came so much longer. And this issue was taken so seriously that before every soccer game, they have to take a vow. And this is for all those Liverpool supporters, all the winners out there. After a week, after those protests, we entered alert level 3 on June 1st. Certain restrictions were eased, but we were still limited in our movements. And we have reached halfway into 2020. How many events have happened? 23. 23 major events have happened over the span of 5 months. 1 month and 3 weeks passed as some considerable time passing, and on July 22nd, the Jerusalem challenge goes viral. I'm sure we all, at least someone here has TikTok. You would have seen this go viral. It was a song made by an artist here at home in South Africa. It sets a worldwide trend. Now, in the image, we can see that there are Italian monks and nuns actually dancing to the song. Now, it might seem like, we're getting together out of COVID, trying to fight this thing together, which is a good thing. But is the sanctity of Christianity being maintained? Satan is slowly desensitizing us to the worldly standards, even if it's through something as jovial as this. 13 days later, on August 4th, there's an explosion in Beirut. Now, this picture looks like it came out of a movie, but it's not. I'm going to show you a video after this that shows the exact same image. Now, the capital of Lebanon went boom after a ship docked in its harbor, and now the ship had as cargo ammonium nitrate. Now, for those in the chemical field, ammonium nitrate is the active component in bombs. So there was a malfunction in some sort of docking for the ship, and it caused the substance to ignite. And 190 people were killed, and 6,000 were injured. It incurred a cost of $4.6 billion, which is approximately 76 trillion rand. Our country will not survive this one either. So what you're about to see is raw footage actually taken by the citizens of Beirut. And it's a bit graphic because these people are actually screaming, fearing for their lives. I want you to think about what your emotions as you watch this. Put yourself into their shoes. If you were to see this happen before your eyes, would you be ready for battleground? If you were to close your eyes on that day? would you be ready for Christ to come if you didn't make it on that day? 2 weeks later, we entered alert level 2 on August 18th. And this is when we finally began experiencing some sort of freedom. Our functions would be held again, our schools were beginning to open, and our stores were opening up for us to shop at. It was a beam of hope at the end of the tunnel. Then on August 28th, actor Chadwick Boseman died due to colon cancer. He hid his diagnosis from the public while they were filming for the current movie he was making, because he was ashamed of what the public would think of him. Not even wealth can save us from death. Couldn't save him. Roughly a month later, we entered alert level 1, and that's where we are right now. And we will continue to be in alert level 1 until our entire population, or at least 60% of us, is vaccinated. That means masks, sanitizing, social distancing will become a part of our lives for the next year or two. And then when we thought the cases were dying down, things were getting better, it hit boom in KZN. We caused the second wave. We caused it for the world, actually. That's what we are famous for. Something really bad as this. So people, please wear your masks, sanitize, stay hygienic, because the virus is still there. On January 20th of 2021, Biden takes office as the 46th US president. Now, the world expects him to bring in peace and to usher in a new era of life. What are we to expect from him? Only time will tell. And then on February 1st, we got our very first shipment of vaccines. But knowing how good our country is, we found out that it was expired. But the good thing is that we have other vaccines such as J&J and the Pfizer vaccine to help us out now. And currently, our country's goal is to vaccinate about 30 to 60% of the population. Now, if you have the opportunity to get vaccinated, please get vaccinated now. There's no mark of the beast in the vaccine. There's no weird 5G thing dealing with the vaccine. Please get it, because this might be the last opportunity to get it for free. After this, you might have to pay a very hefty price for the vaccine. On February 28th, after years, maybe decades of planning, NASA accomplished this very high-tech landing. The Perseverance landed its drone on Mars. Who would have thought 10 years ago extraterrestrial travel would be possible? And together with SpaceX, they are planning to send the first humans to Mars in 2022. That's next year. Didn't the Bible say that knowledge would increase and men will run to and fro? On May 7th, we've seen the horrors of this war, the Israeli Palestine War. This war has been happening since 1948. 1948 is World War II era. Israel and Palestine have been fighting over land, and they refuse to live in peace. Now people, like the Muslims and the Christians, they choose sides. But who are we to stand with? We stand with God, and who does God stand for? God stands for everyone. He stands for life. So we stand for the people who have died and who have been hurt by the ravages of this war. Then on May 30th, we were catapulted back into level 2 lockdown because of the third wave. But thankfully, our church services, they weren't that hampered. But it seems like we're going in this cycle, this very vicious cycle, and it's not ending. Where is the hope? Is Jesus coming? And then what seemed like the end of the world for us actually happened. Starting on July 9th and then moving on to July 18th, we experienced what we thought was a coup, but it was just outright lawlessness. And I don't know for you, but for me, sitting at home, watching these events unroll before my eyes on television and not being able to do anything, I felt absolutely helpless. And we heard the gunshots a few roads away and the march of the people screaming to want to come into your home. That's scary. Now, our mayor said that in Durban, during a 14 July briefing, he said that 45,000 businesses were affected, 129,000 jobs were at stake, and over 16 billion rand in damages was incurred. That's just here, not KZN, Durban. Now, there was an incident on July 12th at Southgate Spa, where a 15-year-old boy was shot with a rubber bullet by police, and he incurred such horrible injuries that he didn't survive. That's what these kinds of riots caused. Even the law had to take such crazy measures. And that push was too graphic to present here. Even on July 13th, the news reached the United Nations. It went so far up that these people condemned what was happening in South Africa. The United Nations, that's huge. Now, we see events like this happening on TV in the past, but now it even hit home. It happened right at our doorstep. If these are the end times, when is the end times? Now, I know some of these events are very distressing. Some of us during this pandemic, we lost hope, our relationship with Christ has declined. Maybe some of us have grown closer to God during this time. But in some way, your relationship with Christ has been impacted by this pandemic and all these events that have happened. Now, I want to give you a plan to help you take hold of your spiritual life again, to come back to Christ, to fall back in love with your Creator. It's now or never. Step number 1. Spend a minimum of 20 minutes with Jesus every morning and afternoon. 5 minutes isn't enough, 10 minutes isn't enough. I know, okay, the elderly generation here, you know, when you were spending time with your partners when you were younger, you didn't spend 5 or 10 minutes, you spent hours or even the whole day with them, because you need to get to know them and to love them. It's the same for Jesus, and He's the most important person in our life. Can please read our verses, Psalm 16:11 and Matthew 4:4.
Psalm 16:11 says, "You will show me the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore." And Matthew 4:4 says, "It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God."
Spend time with Jesus. Was He wants you to spend time with Him? Number 2, tell at least one or more people in your life that you love them and that you are praying for them, and then actually pray for them. Don't just tell them I'm praying for you and then forget about it. Actually pray for them and keep working on this person every week or every 2 weeks. Because people need each other. During this pandemic, I don't know if you realize that we actually need each other. Social contact, even though I don't like calling it social distancing, I like calling it physical distancing, because we still don't socially distance from each other. You get what I mean? First Peter 3:15.
It says, "But in your hearts, revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for your walk that you have."
Number 3, make it compulsory in your home to have family worship at a set time, and preferably before 6 p.m. I know in my home when we have worship, and if we do it after 6, we are really tired. We can't even focus, and we can't give the Lord the love of our time. I remember a hymn that said, "Give up your best to the Master. Give up the strength of your youth." If we have to worship Christ with all our hearts, we have to give Him the best of our time. That includes our worship hour with our family. Jeremiah 17:22 and Joshua 24:14.
Jeremiah 17:22 says, "Do not bring your own out of your houses, or do any work on the Sabbath. Keep the Sabbath day holy, as I commanded your ancestors."
Number 4, when you pray, tell Jesus everything. Your deepest darkest sin or desires. Don't hold back anything. He wants you to be honest with Him. He's your deepest friend. He's your intimate one. Ask Him to reveal His will for your life. And don't be afraid to ask Him for anything. Sometimes we have the notion that following God's will for our life means that when we ask for some things, He hold back. God is a God of yes, not a God of no. And when you pray, tell Him everything. Talk to Him as if He's your friend, because He is. John 15:7, Mark 11:24, and 1 Peter 3:12.
It's verse 24 verse.
John 15:7.
John 15:7 says, "If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you."
Mark 11:24.
"Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours."
1 Peter 3:12.
"For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and His ears are attentive to their prayer, but the face of the Lord is against those who do evil."
The Lord hears your prayers. Don't think that even though we are going through such hard times, everything around us is falling apart and He doesn't hear us. These things have to happen for the end to come. Number 5, sanctify yourself daily. Take up your cross. Make it your daily task to get rid of that addiction or that hindrance in your life that is holding you back from serving God with all your heart. And we are all sinners. We all have that one pet sin in our life that's holding us back from Jesus. Let go of it. Make it your daily task. Take up your cross to deny yourself and to follow Jesus. Psalms 19 verse 14, Psalm 51 verse 10, and Romans 8:36.
Psalms 19:14 says, read these words of my mouth and this meditation of my heart be easily in your sight. Lord, my rock and my redeemer.
And Psalms 51 verse 10 says, create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. And the last one, Romans 8:26, very famous verse. And the same way the Spirit helps us in our weakness. We do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit Himself intercedes for us to wordless groan.
The Holy Spirit groans for you. Even if you don't know the words to pray, just pray. He will help you find the words to pray. I hope you follow each step as you can very faithfully and purpose in your heart to follow Jesus. Because if we are sitting here in church, we're telling people that we are Christians, but we're not doing it in heart. We're fooling ourselves. We should be enjoying ourselves in the world instead of sitting here. So let's live the life that God called us to. Let's return to our loving Savior who gave His life for us. Let's return to the one that we so much desire. I want you to stand with me now. And I want you to put your hand on your heart, as if you were saying the national anthem. But this time, you're not going to sing the national anthem. You're going to say a prayer in your heart. A prayer of yearning desire. That prayer that's been heavy on your heart for so long. Pray it now in your mind to Jesus Christ. Because He hears you now. And the Spirit groans for you. You know the one good thing about our God, that He's a God of hope. He protects us from all of these things. You are still standing here today, aren't you? You're still alive after all of those events. Jeremiah 29:11 says, for I know the plans I have for you, says Yahweh. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. As you ascend this prayer to heaven, I want to leave you with this promise. Psalm 121 verse 7 and 8 says, Yahweh will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. Yahweh will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. Amen. Let's all close our eyes and pray. Our Father, thank you. Thank you that we are alive today after all of this. Thank you that you are here and that you love us so much and that you intend to our aid. I pray now that you'll help us to break down these barriers in our lives that are preventing us from coming to your throne of grace. I pray now that as we leave this place, we will not leave the same. And you will have your Spirit in our hearts, and that you will usher in peace, even though things around us are not peaceful. Bless us now. We love you, Lord, and we know that you love us because you gave your life for us. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Should we do this time again? It's your close, the line and sing on the 6th of